Welcome to Sharing the Wisdom. My name is Kevin Durjun, and I'm working with the TCM Academy on a series of interviews to shine a light on some of the wonderful work and characters illuminating the marvelous world of TCM. Today, we're going to be a little bit glamorous. We're going to spend some time with filmmaker Mia Donovan. Mia's based in Montreal, and she's written and directed 3 feature documentaries, and her films have been widely shared at film festivals, on TV, and platforms like Netflix. And she's here today to talk about her marvelous documentary, Dope is Death. Welcome, Mia Donovan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So excited. You're absolutely sprinkling some Montreal film glamour onto our program.
Thank
So,
you.
so let's kick off. Tell us about your film.
Well, Dope is Death traces this history that's becoming more known about how the Black Panthers and the Young Lords and other Black Power activists like Dr. Mutulu Shakur, who's Tupac Shakur's stepfather, how these young people discovered the benefits of acupuncture for treating victims of the drug plague in the South Bronx or in New York during the early 70s. So they basically discovered how acupuncture could be used to treat withdrawal symptoms and secondary symptoms associated with drug use, as well as the underlying issues that might drive someone to seek drugs for relief. So like anxiety, depression. So they discovered this program of a non-chemical treatment for drug addiction at a time when methadone maintenance was the standard, and it still is today to some degrees, for treating opioid and heroin withdrawal symptoms. So it's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. It is absolutely amazing. I love the film, by the way. I thought it was
Thank you.
very moving, very, very moving, and it was beautiful. Um, where did the title "Dope is Death" come from?
A lot of people ask me about this. It was one of their slogans. So back then they were very militantly opposed to methadone, to drugs, to heroin and methadone. And they saw the activists viewed drugs as part of a chemical warfare to pacify resistance in communities of color, in Black and Puerto Rican communities in particular. So Dope is Death was a slogan that they used, which today sounds very extreme, but in the political context, it makes more sense, because today we think of harm reduction and different approaches to treat. But yeah, so it comes from their actual political slogans that said, "Dope is death. We will fight heroin and methadones by any means necessary." So they had this sort of, this militant approach to really fighting drugs. They really saw them as weapons. So this is why the slogan was so, and it just sort of stuck with me but I have gotten a lot of questions about it.
Now, um, did you come from an acupuncture background, or where did the idea for creating this documentary come from?
No, not a, I mean, I was always open to acupuncture, but what really struck me about the film was, first of all, I met Dr. Mario Wexu, who's a retired acupuncturist in Montreal who a friend recommended. And he I have chronic migraines, or had chronic migraines, are much better. So he was treating me for acupuncture, and he had this poster on his wall in his apartment, which we see in the documentary, that had these black illustrations of black hands holding needles, and it said, "We will fight heroin and methadone by any means necessary," the Lincoln Detox. And it was just this, I was like asking him about it. And then he told me how the Montreal connection between the acupuncturists, or sorry, the connection between the Black Panthers and Montreal, because Mario and his father started the first acupuncture school in North America in Montreal in 1970. So when Dr. Shakur, the Black Panthers and the Young Lords wanted to learn, the only school was in Montreal, which was in French. But Mario, who was like 22 at the time and bilingual, him and his dad agreed to give 4 members of this collective scholarships and to teach them in English.
God, what a
That's sort of
wonderful.
a long answer, but it's just like this strange, like I was like, I heard this and I was like, how come more people don't know about this? And on a personal note, I have a stepbrother who has been on and off of methadone for decades and different pain and painkillers and heroin. And he's struggled with, this idea of going off drugs, getting on other drugs. So I was like, wow, acupuncture, like, and then start to do more research.
And it absolutely works. It absolutely works. Over here, I don't know if you heard of the Grenfell Tower tragedy. A few years ago, we had a big tower block in West London that the entire tower block was destroyed in fire, and many people died in it. And some very dear friends of mine set up an ear acupuncture service in a local mosque right next to this tower, and they have been working in the community, helping people every week, just popping in a few needles, and people sit in silence, and the levels of trauma, the levels of sadness, the levels of distress, but also all of the other wonderful things. Oh, my digestion's got a little bit better and I'm sleeping better. And it really does have such profound impact.
Absolutely. The same thing after 9/11, there was a tent set up in a church where NADA practitioners, your acupuncture practitioners, were treating first responders for trauma. Yeah, I mean, it's been used worldwide for since the mid 80s, but it's only really the last, I would say, 8 years or so that students and scholars are really digging up this history and celebrating it, and um, like giving the credit to the activists as well, and the real roots of where this amazing protocol came from, and
Yeah, yeah.
what kind of like how it arose, like why it was, how it makes sense that it was created to serve the needs of this population that had a huge distress for the Western medicine. So it was a means towards self-determination to heal the community. It started off to heal as a response to drugs, but then it grew to treat, they start treating, by the end of the 70s, they were treating like mothers of drug users for anxiety. It was just spreading in the community, and then it got shut down. But um,
There's some real, I mean, there's love woven through this film, and I could feel it. I could feel it, and at some points I was so moved. There's this lovely scene when one of the NADA practitioners, he breaks down in tears when he's talking about how much he loves doing this work, because it's so important for his people to be out of pain, and he breaks down, and I mean, really beautiful. Um, but in addition to love being woven through, there's some real fire. There's real fire about injustice. I wonder if you could talk to us a bit about that, and how you as a director managed to put those emotions into film.
well, I think the program, like, we can't separate this movement of healing and treat and serving the community without having the political context, because it was, first of all, since the beginning, the acupuncture program was under attack by the funding agencies of the Lincoln Detox. So the city, because they accused the Lincoln Detox of exploiting funds, of not actually providing real treatment because they weren't providing methadone. And they really had to fight to keep this program alive in the context of, getting city funds, because they wanted to, it was a huge problem. New York had 25% of the heroin users in the US. It was such a big problem. People needed this treatment, people needed help, and they were providing not only the relief with acupuncture, but providing a holistic approach. Like, there was a community, they were teaching courses they called them political education courses, but a lot of times it was like, these are your rights as a tenant. Like, this is, these are your rights. Like, you need to vote. Like, they were just getting people involved in their own community. And I think for myself as a filmmaker, I was just trying to find the heart of the movement, like what is really, what everybody can relate to. So we really understand that it, like these groups like the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, these groups that have somehow become so labeled as like radical militants or even terrorists in some cases, like we don't, it's so underrepresented, the actual real work that they did to provide basic services to the community that was outside of a capitalist system, and that was just about love and like healing people. And their motto was each one teach one. So they were really about like, we can all like work together to heal ourselves. The whole thing is just really beautiful and makes sense, and it's survived. But had they not been shut down in 1978, who knows how much that would have grown. Like their approach. I mean, what's good is we still have the NADA protocol, but it was really stripped down from the kind of community program with the political education classes and just that supportive space.
I loved being able, I mean, I'm so nosy. I'm an acupuncture practitioner and I love nosing around other people's practices. I loved the acupuncture room where the sessions were taking place. It felt really, miles away from sterile, divorced surroundings. This really was about groups of people coming together and just talking openly. There's this lovely scene where there was a young lady who was needling in one ear and another guy was needling the other ear, and I just thought, how wonderful to have two people caring for one person at a time. Just in itself, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, and now, I mean, that being in that space was really powerful. Just being able to sit, like to be able to spend a couple afternoons there, because people would come in, and you could tell they were very like withdrawn and sort of tense and irritable and not really like making eye contact. And then one would give the acupuncture needles, and then within about like 5 minutes, you would see people transform and they would relax, and then everybody would start talking. And it was really quite beautiful. It was obviously very beautiful to witness it happening. Like the real effects that you can't really deny. When people are like, "Oh," so many people ask me, "But does it really work?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it does, because I also got the treatment, and there is like, it's great." And now I'm happy to report that the New York Harm Reduction Educators Clinic has grown. So now their room is like 3 times the size, so they can treat so many more people. And like the Lincoln Detox, the sitting in circle, like the way Dr. Matula Shakur described it, it was like having everybody sitting in a circle was important because nobody knew what acupuncture was. They were nervous about the needles. So they could come in and see their friends or their neighbors receiving it, and it made it less scary. And also the energy of everybody kind of just sitting together they recognize that, that power in the healing.
So important, so important. Really beautiful. I mean, lucky you to be part of that community.
Yeah, I feel very grateful and fortunate that I was able to, like to find out about this history and then have this partake in it this way to bring light to this amazing practice, and just to meet these great people that are so inspiring.
And how readily received were you into this community? Because presumably people go, week after week after week, and they build relationships. How easy was it for you to become trusted?
Well, thanks to Juan Cortez, who after, he didn't we met many times in person and spoke on the phone before he agreed to really like participate. And he asked everyone before I went to the clinic. And a lot of people, we asked people before if they were comfortable, but that's really because of Juan. They trust Juan so much. So since Juan trusted me and my camera person Glauco, I mean, it, it worked. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have been possible without, doing documentaries is a lot of it is building relationships over time. Not only so people can trust you, but also so you can really understand the people you're representing, because that's a huge responsibility. The film will be out forever. And as a filmmaker, that's it. You have to respect that, the responsibility of immortalizing these images of the people who are allowing you to film them. So
And how now there is an awful lot of stigma still associated with drug addiction. How open were the people who you interviewed about sharing their stories and about being open about their addictions?
I mean, not everybody is, but those that were, they're the people that we spoke to are at a place where they're still, we didn't, where they're in the process of healing and they understand. I mean, they were just, I guess it's a personal decision. The people we spoke to felt very comfortable and they saw it as a way to further destigmatize addiction, because the more people speak openly and you see that, oh, they've, like Juan Cortez was an active user for 18 years and he's like, he's like him in the position he is helping other people. Like if you're feeling hopeless and you meet, somebody like Juan Cortez or other people who've turned their life around and who are living so healthy and, are sharing, that's very inspiring and motivating. So I think people understand that if they're willing to share about their experience, right?
I loved hearing some of the descriptions. Oh gosh, I feel very calm, and I don't feel angry. And just
Yeah,
hearing these just normal people talking about something that's actually very profound. I'm an acupuncture practitioner. You've now seen a lot of acupuncture work, so it might be very easy for us to take that for granted. But calming down and soothing emotions and getting in control of ourselves, that's massive stuff. Absolutely massive stuff. And to hear people articulating it with so much gratitude, I thought was really, really beautiful. Very.
absolutely. Yeah.
Now, many people, acupuncture practitioners are very sort of calm, genteel sorts of folks. And politics can often be the last thing on their mind. Is, from your perspective, acupuncture political?
Well, I see I mean, it's hard for me not to see it political now after researching this history and understanding how it grew out of these social economic conditions, um, in a response to how healthcare is politicized and how big pharma is politicized and the war on drugs. So it came from this place. I understand also how it doesn't need to be a political space. Like Mario Wexu, who's the teacher who taught these activists acupuncture, he's not political. Like he's always like, I didn't even know they were Black Panthers until later. Like he just wanted to make sure people understand how to heal each other. But I also understand that in the context of fighting the war on drugs and oppression in America, where white supremacy is so prevalent and racism, that the healing nature of understanding white supremacy is part of the healing, if that makes sense. Like they talked a lot, like the political education classes, they talked a lot about framing addiction in a socioeconomic context, whereas experience, like friends of mine and what I know about like 12-step programs and a lot of other therapeutic approaches, it's a lot about taking personal responsibility for drug use. But it's not that the individual doesn't have a responsibility, but you look at it as
It's
who do
part
drugs
of.
serve, Yeah. So I think You know, so it's hard to not think about it in politically in that way.
Well, it's certainly stimulated a big fire within me and a real desire, a real desire. I was thinking, now where can I set up my clinic? I want to set up a clinic like this. I want to be spreading good within my community. It really did have that impact on me. Um, what did you? What impact did you hope or intend for your documentary to have on people who watch it?
Well, there's so many things, but one thing is kind of to provide on a very individual personal level, Mutulu Shakur, to provide a counter narrative to who he is, because he's been incarcerated for 35 years. He's been labeled this a very dangerous criminal, and the work that he did in the community to treat drugs has been pretty much like written or not written, you know, like omit it from history. So it was like part of it was to provide this counter narrative so people understand, and also to think more critically on who we criminalize in society and the role of drugs in society. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to answer that in like a, but there's obviously I wanted to share this history in hopes that people think differently about these things.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I love the fact that you have shone such a beautiful and very gentle light onto something very, very profound. And I hope that lots of people who watch it will maybe think, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to give that a try, or I'm going to recommend it for my son or whoever who might be dealing with addiction issues. What's the response been? What feedback have you had so far?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. I know Dr. Shakur has been getting so many letters, which is amazing. I know that the NADA, National Acupuncture Detox Association, has now changed their history, like has written Dr. Shakur, the Black Panthers and the Young Lords into their history, and really acknowledged that it didn't start in 1985, it started in 1973. And a lot of acupuncture schools have contacted to acquire the film for their library. So it's been awesome. Like, that's amazing. And I think for Dr. Shakur, like, he really deserves that. I visited him many times in prison, and he would try and take my pulse, you know, like he's just such a, and the guards would put an end to it. But like, he's a gifted healer. Sometimes when I talk to him on the phone, he'll read my voice. He'll be like, wait a second, take a breath. You're sounding a little, you know, you're sounding very, like you have a lot of anxiety. What's happening? Like, he's really understands how to relate to people, not just intellectually, but in a really, you know, like as a healer. So, and it's beautiful. There's not a lot of people like that. I mean,
Well, I had no idea until I watched your documentary. I had no idea about the roots. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. So this, you really are helping to clarify history.
I couldn't really ask for more. That's amazing. That's, you know, that's what I think is my, what I love to do, what I love about documentary filmmaking
Yeah.
is that we can learn stuff like this, but also not just learn like the facts, but hopefully get to know these people, you know, like get a sense of who they were. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, thank you.
I'd like to hear just a teeny weeny bit about what inspires you. So, what draws you to particular topics for your films?
I mean, for me, I think it really is often there's stories about people who have been misrepresented or underrepresented or somehow like represented with suspicion, or really just like people who the media who are sort of victim of the dominant mainstream kind of narrative that often stereotypes people or just doesn't really give them the right attention. I'm thinking of all my films, but they're so different, you know.
This is wonderful. Mia
Mhm.
Donovan, thank you so much for joining us today on Sharing the Wisdom. No. Before we go, where can people watch Dope is Death, and how can they watch it?
It's available in most countries. I know in the UK, the US, on a streaming platform online, this shortlist.vice.com. And otherwise, if it's not available in those countries now, it will be available at the end of April everywhere on VOD. But right now it's if you go to shortlist.vice.com.
Marvelous, marvelous. Mia Donovan, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today and being so generous with it at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.